quarterly task force meeting. Thank you all so much for being with us this morning. Beautiful spring morning, and I'm really excited for this meeting. I want to emphasize that I think that we all have done an amazing job of transitioning from the posture of making recommendations to the hard work of implementing them. And I just want to really thank you all, because that's not an easy thing. I don't take it for granted that, and I think we're all aware of really how short a time we actually have to get these things all done, and we've really, I think, hit the ground running. So I want to thank everyone for that. And I also want to emphasize we are going to hear from 3 of the subcommittees today. That does not mean that work is not continuing full speed ahead on the other subcommittees. And so I want to encourage you to see these full task force meetings certainly as an opportunity to hear what the other committees that you're not on, hear what they're doing, hear how you might be able to contribute, advance, you might have ideas, suggestions, but also as a time to bring to the full group if there are challenges you're facing, questions you have, ways in which the full task force could be helpful, or something that the full task force should know about. I hope you won't feel too constrained by the agenda, and that people will volunteer, wave at me on the screen or somehow let us know what's going on. So I really want this to be an open time for us to be able to share and collaborate. And so I think with that, I want to check in and see if my co-chair, Attorney General Stein, are there any initial words of greeting you want to bring to us? So I've caught him not on camera. I'll wait till he gets back with, oh, there you are, okay.
Just looking forward to everyone's reports today. Thanks, Anita.
Okay, great. Well, I do have a couple of announcements. And the first one, I'm excited that you all may know or remember that the governor appointed the Andrea Harris task force at the same time our task force was appointed, and that there is certainly some overlap in the issues. And I think the exciting news is that Pam Cashwell, who has been participating in many of this task force's meetings as in her role with Secretary Hooks, has now been appointed Secretary of the Department of Administration. And in that role, she will chair the Andrea Harris Task Force. And I think that will facilitate even greater collaboration to the extent that there is overlap in the work of these 2 task forces. So I wanted to kind of make everyone aware of that and share that good news with you. I know that Secretary Hooks is sorry to be losing her, but I also know that she'll continue to be able to contribute to our work to the extent that it overlaps with the Andrea Harris Task Force. And then for our second announcement, I want to turn it over to Natalia, who has some good news for us from the governor's office.
Hi, everyone. Good to see y'all. I know as we're entering into this implementation phase of the task force, we're all eager to see progress being made. So I'm excited to be here with you all today and share that yesterday the governor signed Executive Order 208, which establishes a juvenile sentence review board, and that's based on TREC recommendation number 70. And what that board will do, it will review sentences that were imposed on juveniles who are sentenced as adults, and give them the opportunity for a second look at their sentence after either 20 years or 15 years in certain instances of stacked sentences, and then make recommendations to the governor directly about clemency and commutation. So I know the governor's really appreciative of everybody's hard work on this task force and looks forward to seeing more recommendations become policy in North Carolina. And I also want to especially thank Marsha Morey, who's going to be chairing the Juvenile Review Board, which will be a 4-person board. And I know she'll do a phenomenal job. So happy to answer any questions now or later. Thanks, y'all.
So Representative Moore, do you want to say a word about, and congratulations on chairing this really important board. Do you want to tell us a little more about your plans?
Well, the ink is barely dry, so I am just really thrilled that the governor has made this executive order. That's one of the main recommendations of this TREC commission. It's going to be a daunting job. It will be looking at probably hundreds of cases of juveniles 16, 17 that were sentenced as adults. This is before the raise the age. And these will be, you know, fairly significant cases to thoroughly look at. There is a committee of 4 of us. The former Representative Mickey Michaud will be on it. Thomas Walker will be on it. Former Appellate Court, U.S. Court, Allison Duncan will be on it. So some really good minds and hearts on this. We look forward to trying to chart out new territory and give the governor the best report and recommendations for him to consider. So any advice of any of you would be very welcome as we start a new endeavor, but really, really grateful. And I think this is a primary tenet of the TREC. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions or comments at this stage, so I'm gonna move us right to the report from Committee 3, the Legislative Action Committee.
Thank you, Justice Earls, and good morning, everyone. As you all know, the General Assembly is in session. They're actually not in session this week, but they are in session this last couple of months, and we have a lot more to report today than we did last month because bills had not yet been introduced, and now we've had what Representative Maury and Chair of the Juvenile Sentence Review Board said would be a tsunami of bills. And so I've been very pleased with just the energy and the work that's happened both at our committee, but also at an individual level of all of our committee members, and also Attorney General Stein, your staff has just been phenomenal, and Natalia. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bradford to start us out, give us an overview, and then we'll have a little bit more report from Representative Maury and Senator Mohammed and Representative Galliard if you'd like to participate. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. Like folks have said, the legislature has been full speed ahead over the last couple of weeks, especially with the Senate filing deadline earlier this week, and then crossover fast approaching on May the 13th. I am pleased to announce that many of the topics that we targeted for this legislative session have been addressed by the House and the Senate, which is something to be extremely proud about. Topics such as requiring law enforcement officers to wear body-worn and use dashboard cameras and disclosing that footage to civil review boards within 45 days, decriminalizing possession of marijuana of up to 1.5 ounces, creating drug treatment courts and mental health courts and providing adequate funding, requiring SROs to get a school administrator's signature before moving forward in the juvenile justice system with a juvenile, banning chokeholds unless deadly force is authorized per statute, and eliminating cash bail for certain misdemeanors. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of this has to do with the extreme hard work by Senator Mohammed, Representative Maury, and Representative Galliard with their colleagues in the House and the Senate. Can't thank them enough for all the things they've been doing behind the scenes and advocating for these topics and policy proposals with the legislature. And I think it'd be great to hear from Representative Maury and Representative Galliard first about some of their efforts in the House.
I guess I'll jump in and thank you. We are moving some bills through committee. We kind of tried to figure out what's the best strategy in the House and the Senate. It may be different just because those two bodies are so different. So we've done some minor bills that address maybe one topic or another. One that's gotten some movement is raise the minimum age from 6. TREC recommended 12, but we introduced a bill 6-year-olds to 10-year-olds because that seemed to get Republican co-sponsorship. It unanimously passed the House Committee on Family, Child, and Aging, and now it goes to Judiciary 2 whenever they put it on. So we're working with them, but most importantly, we're working with the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee to have their best thoughts and their endorsement, and that will really help that bill go forward. Some of the others are the prosecution's discretion to try A through G felonies, keep them in juvenile court. And Senator Mohammed can talk about his proposal. That's a separate bill we've introduced. That's not assigned to a committee. We've had a couple bills about first appearances. Remember some of our discussion, many people in the state who get charged with the highest charge of a misdemeanor sit in jail without having a first appearance. So we have two bills. One requires it within 48 hours. And the Courts Commission did a separate bill requiring it within 72 hours. So we hope those are going to both move and come together in a single bill. The eliminating cash bail went right to rules, which meant in the House side, that probably will not be going anywhere, but we'll see. We hope it could be resurrected maybe in Senator Mohammed's omnibus bill. The Schedule 6, making it infractions instead of a criminal charge, is moving forward. We have 4 Republican sponsors of juvenile with life without parole, which is exciting. Representative Faircloth, former chief of police, has stepped up and taken that. And then we're thinking about an omnibus bill, and I'll follow after Senator Mohammed talks about that. And it'll include everything. We didn't file these separate bills forward. Our deadline is next week on filing bills, and then we have crossover in May, which means House bills must pass and cross over to the Senate to stay alive. So that's my nutshell wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you. Do I see Senator Mohammed? If you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Telly. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone again this morning. Happy Friday. Just want to begin by giving a congratulations to Representative Morey for the appointment to the review board and commending Governor Cooper for his efforts and your leadership on this task force. Because if it wasn't for the work of each and every one of you today, this review board wouldn't take place. Exactly what you heard about the review board. This is all about giving second chances, second looks to our children. I've had experience representing children in our justice system, so I'm excited to see this huge step move forward. As far as a legislative work, we've been so busy. I want to give a huge shout to Jasmine McGee and Bradford for all their help and support in our efforts, and of course Tally as part of our legislative committee, the rest of the legislative group, and Representative Morey and Galliard. What I will say is we did file a comprehensive omnibus bill right before the filing deadline on Tuesday. It's called the Equity and Justice Act of 2021, Senate Bill 656. The primary sponsors are Representative Jay Chaudhry and Representative Natalie Murdoch. We're looking forward to getting a companion bill in the state House as well. This bill covers everything from increasing transparency and accountability in policing, addressing racial disparities in our court systems, and working to reduce the school to prison pipeline. All the recommendations are supported by you on our task force, but there's also other great positive steps. You heard Representative Morey talk about movement on raising the age of jurisdiction for juvenile delinquency. Our bill, Senate Bill 207, with the support of JJAC and support of Senator Danny Britt and Senator Warren Daniel, both Republicans, passed Judiciary and Rules unanimously and passed the North Carolina State Senate unanimously. So now it's headed to the State House. It raises the age of delinquency to 10. We would have loved to have 12 like our task force recommended, but like you heard Representative Morey talk about right now, the appetite is only for up to age 10. So it's exciting to see there's movement there. Bipartisan support. In addition, we've got 2 other bills that have bipartisan support. Senate Bill 490, License to Work. It's primarily sponsored by myself, Senator Ralph Heiss, and Senator Danny Britt as well. That's working to restore people's driver's licenses for failures to pay fines and fees. Once at least up to 12 months have passed and they can provide some sort of proof of liability insurance. In addition, we've got Senator Mike Lee and Senator Britt working with us on a decriminalization of non-statutory offenses. So those are some of our bipartisan efforts. I would urge each and every one of you on the task force to support a number of our TREC bills that were filed. Unfortunately, a lot of them only have Democratic primary sponsors. Again, the omnibus bill supports all the work that we've been doing, Equity and Justice Act of 2021, Senate Bill 656. So I would urge each of you to have those conversations in your community and help out in the North Carolina Senate and the House by helping us lobby for those efforts, hoping some of the folks on the other side of the aisle take some of these bills as far as some sort of amendment process or something to bring progress to this much needed work. So thank you to each and every one of you.
Thank you. And I want to just echo what you just said, Senator Mohammed, just how critical it is that we're talking to our individual representatives and senators. I mean, we represent so many different parts of the state. I know Senator Mohammed, you and Representative Maury would be happy to just walk folks through if they were going to set up a meeting with their representative or senator on the critical issues involving your representative or senator. But that's going to be a big part of the difference for moving these things forward. And so I just appreciate all the work that everyone's done. And Bradford, do you have anything else that you want to make sure that we update the committee? Or
just again, thank you to our legislative members and Tara as well. I know there's just a lot of work going on behind the scenes and it's paying off.
Thank you. And Tara, did you have any other additional?
I mean, so we're still working with the dignity language. The Sheriff's Association has some real problems about having jails included, so that's been an obstacle. And there's a massive expunctions bill that Senator Britt filed that I think we'd like to see. It's generally good policy, but it has a 20-year waiting period for two felonies, which just seems unnecessarily long. So we're hopeful that we're going to be able to get that down in the House. Great. But otherwise, it's a good policy.
Thank you. And I'll turn it back to you, Justice Earls.
Well, I want to open it up for discussion. Do people have any questions, observations?
Senator Mohammed, you saved me a phone call. I had hoped to talk to. I was going to call Representative Maury about the driver's license issue. It's something we might be able to slip in there that would be low-hanging fruit. You've already done that. Sounds like you have bipartisan support for that. Does that look promising? What do you call it? Is it the license to work? Is that the title of it?
License to work, I believe it's Senate Bill 490. Look, Judge Thornburg, you've got the Deputy Pro Tem of the North Carolina Senate as the lead primary sponsor of that bill. So Senator Ralph Heiss is actually pretty passionate about the issue. He wanted to join Senator Danny Britt and I. My issue is we filed bills similar to this in prior sessions. The problem is sometimes they get bogged down because folks think that it's too much work to get this done on some of the staff in our district courts and at our district court level. So that's probably going to be one of the concerns. So that's what we're trying to make it as easy as possible. So I would urge you to continue to help us get more community support for this bill. That way there's no obstacles, because it's something that's much needed. We've got thousands and thousands of people across North Carolina who simply can't drive to work, have decent housing simply because they don't have access to a driver's license and they can't pay those court fees and fines. We're appreciative of so many of our district court and superior court judges who oftentimes try to waive those fines and fees, but they don't always necessarily have attorneys next to them to help get those fines and fees waived. So it's a critical problem, and I appreciate this task force highlighting that, and I hope we do get it passed. So thank you.
Well, if you need testimonials from any of my colleagues, let us know. That's what it really means.
Absolutely.
Thank you for doing it.
Senator Mohammed, Arizona just passed a law along those lines. I don't know if you saw that, but it further demonstrates this is not a partisan issue. Arizona has a Republican legislature, Republican governor, but they realize if you take away people's driver's license, you take away their livelihood.
And Attorney General Stein, that's why we came up with the word language license to work. That's exactly what the bill's titled. And my Republican colleagues are the ones who came up with the name. So that's exciting. Thank you.
Anyone else? This might be more relevant to the next committee report, which is communications, but I wanted to ask Tara about the Dignity Act, because it seemed to me there was a really good piece. It was, I know not too many people read the print News and Observer anymore, but I'm one of those dinosaurs who does. And it was on the front page, a story about the need for that law. And so I just would like to hear more from you about if that's helpful, if that's possible.
Yeah, so we were working, Will Duran has been really, so we have kind of a coalition of folks behind that bill, because it's been a long time coming, and it's a much heavier lift than I think folks would anticipate. But we've been working with Will Duran, and he's been really, really interested in the issue. And so he's been meeting with various folks in our coalition that are supportive of the effort. And Dr. Carrie Ann Crockett is the OBGYN from Pitt County who attended to a woman whose child ultimately died in the transportation between jails. And so she's just been an unbelievable advocate. And I think she was interviewed for that story. If she wasn't, there'll be another story where she will be. So the legislation is pretty solidly supported. We're working on getting, strong female business leader support behind it. We've got really bipartisan interest. It's just, and introducing anything new into the jail system is always the challenge.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for this committee? Well, thank you, Tally, for that, and for all the amazing work. It really is impressive. So let me turn then to the Communications Committee and for their report on their work.
So I'm gonna rely mostly on Laura and the staff, because as most of the work is done by them anyway, I just get to join the committee and have lots of ideas. But I feel like we are the committee that gets the problem children recommendations that nobody else knows what to do with. And we just think through them and try to figure out, how we might be able to message these issues to folks who aren't already at the table and interested in them. We put together focus groups that are really incredible, and I'm excited for you to hear from Laura about those on several of the reforms or the recommendations that we were assigned. And I think one of the things that we've done that I'm most excited about, and anybody who has operated in the legislative policy area understands the significance of one-pagers. I mean, legislators have hundreds of documents of bills on their desk at any given time, and I don't think people realize how hard it is for them to really understand the meat of legislation without, there's just too much. There's a bandwidth. And so, having these one-pagers that explain what the legislation does, and then explain what the need for it is, are just absolutely essential for being able to make them proper advocates, and then just being able to advocate ourselves. So I'll turn it over to Laura now.
Whoops, I'm really bad about that mute button lately. Thank you, Tara, and thanks everybody. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing as a committee. Ellen, you can go to the next slide. So this is our committee structure. You can see up top here the recommendations that we've been assigned to help try to move the landscape forward to help people start to understand and appreciate these ideas. And then to sort of attack those, we've organized ourselves into focus areas based on those deliverables. So we've got a little crew who's working on the victim advisory group, a group working on the fact sheets and videos, another group working on the addiction forum, and then the focus groups, which I'm going to spend the most time talking about today, is the most, we've made the most progress in that area. Go to the next slide. Here are our members. Our committee is a little unusual in that most of our members are not on the full task force. We've got Joy Cook, Angelica Wind, Gerda Stein, and Sarah Willits, who make up our committee as a whole. On the victim advisory group, we've got Joy, Angelica, and Gerda, who are working on that, and they are in the planning phase, starting to think through members and structure and how that victim advisory group will work together to help push us forward. We learned in the focus groups that victims' voices are extremely compelling and important for this work. So that advisory group is going to be even more important, I think, than we anticipated when the idea first came about. So that's exciting work that's happening. We can go to the next slide. For the fact sheets, we aren't branding these as the task force. They're just sort of partially that's because there's a lot of information to fit on one piece of paper and we want them all to be one page, but there's no branding. It's just kind of the information about each bill. So we've got one pagers that we've been putting together to help inform people, various stakeholders about what the legislation will do. As we need it, we'll also be creating videos. We know some people like to read what they are learning and some people like to hear and see it. So we're going to try to have a little bit of everything prepared. You can see here some of the ones we've already drafted and are out there in the mix, helping guide some of these conversations. There are more to come. And if there are any committees, particularly Bradford, I know you and the legislative committee, we've been working closely on this, but if there are any committees that need additional resources or one-pagers, I hope you'll let Tara or me know, and we'll be happy to help. We can go to the next one. The Addiction Forum is a forum that I actually forget which committee wanted to do it, but Natalia is leading that effort. And we're going to do a roundtable via Zoom on the racial equity implications of addiction. We're in the planning phase of that one as well, trying to decide how many to do, if we should do them regionally, or if there should just be one statewide. We're actually leaning right now toward doing one statewide. Some of the things that we know we want to do with this task force, with this addiction forum, is expand it. It's not going to be about any particular drug of choice. It's going to be about all addiction and the implications of racial equity and criminal justice. So I think the panelists will likely include a medical professional, a person who is themselves either in recovery or they've had a close family member that they've lost to addiction, someone with a firsthand experience, someone in the law enforcement community. And the goal will be to help local communities know what's happening elsewhere and get ideas to take back to their community, whether it's for an in-jail treatment program or for a law enforcement assisted diversion program, that type of thing that they can then implement locally. So work continues there. If anyone has any ideas, please let Natalia or me or Sarah know, and we'd be happy to work with you and incorporate those ideas. You can go to the next slide. And then this is what I wanted to spend the most time with you. Whoops. Go one back, please. This is what I wanted to spend the most time with you guys on today. This is our focus groups overview. One thing I wanted to really clearly point out is that we were only responsible for the hard costs, the vendor costs to recruit and pay the participants of these focus groups. Megan Ners, who runs MLN Research, donated her time to conduct 4 focus groups. So I just wanted to thank her publicly and talk about how wonderful and generous that was, because they were very useful and provided us with a lot of information that I think will be helpful. We conducted these groups because we were charged with sort of moving the ball forward on these issues. And we wanted to better understand how North Carolinians currently think about them. Focus groups are a great way to do that. As you all know, these are qualitative, not quantitative. So we can't extrapolate and say, well, this is how everybody thinks, or this is numbers that mean something. But they can help us really dive into our messaging and make sure that we're messaging in a way that's compelling and useful to the people who are hearing the messages. So Megan and her team led 4 90-minute online groups. All the groups had a mix of men and women, and we tried to reach urban and rural residents from across the state. The pandemic actually helped us here because they were all conducted on Zoom, and so we could really pull from various geographies all over North Carolina. We tried to reach people in the center right and the center left and divide accordingly. So there were 2 groups with people who were identified as the center right, and in that group we didn't take any race considerations. They all happened to be white. One group was Gen Xers and millennials, and one group was boomers. And then we also did 2 groups of people who identify as center left, and that had one group of white individuals with no changes for age and one group of Black individuals with no changes for age. And now we can go to the next one. Some of the findings there were really helpful and interesting. Broadly, when we started, the more broad we were, the more consensus there was. When Megan and her team talked to the respondents about the criminal justice system being unjust, or there being problems with the criminal justice system in a really broad way without a lot of specificity, most of the participants agreed and knew that there were issues that needed to be addressed. So that's positive. There's general consensus among these groups for making some kind of changes. This is what I was mentioning or alluding to earlier. When we talk about victims and protecting victims, both groups across the ideological spectrum agreed that victims need to be centered and that victims' rights need to be paramount in the criminal justice system. Both groups also agreed with a review of old sentences. So yesterday's news, that's helpful. Both groups agreed that older sentences should be taken a closer look at now. And I also thought this was interesting. Fines and fees, we kind of thought was going to be a more kind of a longer lead time to explain and get people on board with. But people really across the board agreed that there should be some consideration of people's ability to pay when using fines and fees. One thing that's interesting about that is we included a story. It's actually the story from the task force report about the person who had the issue with the fines and fees. You guys maybe remember it because you wrote it, that it was in that report. And I think that story really made a difference, because what we also learned is that particularly on the center right, anytime we mention data or research shows or studies show or X% of this or that, the center right was skeptical. They would say, well, I don't know what that study is, or I don't know that data, so I don't trust it. And then even if she said, well, here's the study, they said, well, studies can be manipulated. I don't buy it. So evidence in any kind of data or research form was met with a big level of skepticism. So I thought that was incredibly interesting. The personal stories, this is what I was alluding to also earlier, the personal stories are much more compelling for these general public audiences, which I think is a really important learning lesson. Another thing that I thought was interesting was that people, when we talk about criminal justice system with racial equity, there was a lot of difference. People on the left, they were checked in immediately. Yeah, of course, racial equity, got to make it an issue. On the center right, they seem to see it more as a socioeconomic issue, and they were not at all, or very few people, more so women, were compelled by the idea that racial equity should be a consideration in criminal justice reform. So that's something that we need to think about and consider. Across all the groups, no one really knew what restorative justice was. They sort of liked it, particularly on the left. On the right, they had a lot of questions about, well, should a victim be that involved? That kind of thing. And so I think we have some work to do there in terms of even kind of explaining what restorative justice is and introducing it as a concept and helping people understand it. So that's something else to consider. We can go to the next slide. So the next steps with these focus groups is we need to obviously use what we've learned here as we work on other communications to liberals. We're already starting to do that in the fact sheets, starting to learn a little bit from what we've seen and take action there. And then also we'll use what we've learned as we develop messaging for other issues and other committees on what they're doing. We're going to have to consider current public sentiment to meet people where they are. And there's just one other piece that I had wanted to mention in terms of the finding, and that was that the idea of innocence, whenever we talked about, well, what if someone was innocent or they were wrongfully convicted? That was among all the groups one of the most compelling ideas for taking any kind of reform. I think probably, we've seen that a lot in pop culture. We've seen a lot of movies and documentaries and podcasts and books about people who are innocent and were wrongfully convicted. And I think that has really kind of taken hold in the general public, and people find that to be a very compelling reason to conduct reform or to look back at sentences or take changes. The idea that the criminal justice is full of humans who make mistakes. And so that's something else that I think is important to include in our future work. So that is where we are on the focus groups. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk with you all about any of this other work that might be of interest to you. I know I'm a fast talker, so feel free to jump in with questions. I'm sorry for that.
Well, I'll jump in with a question about, I'm curious about the fact sheets and how they're being disseminated and how there might be access to them. So for example, are they on the TREC website, or if someone, if the public wants to see them, how are we making those available?
Tara, do you want to address that?
I assume they're probably on SharePoint, but they are shared with the legislative committee. And then I've been making sure that all the advocacy folks that I know are working on the various issues have access to them. And they've been beyond complimentary. I have to not take credit for them because they think I'm incredible for creating these brilliant fact sheets. But we can make sure to disseminate them broadly to this the whole task force, and we've been sharing them with legislators. They're, obviously we're in the middle of bill filing, so they're just really great tools to be able to help educate folks. So anything we can do to make sure they're more broadly disseminated, we're certainly open to.
Thanks. Other questions?
I just can't thank the staff of the committee enough for their hard work. They make me look good without having to do a lot of work. And I can't really adequately explain how important it is to, think through this sort of messaging, just to figure out how to meet people where they are, to make them consider most people haven't thought about the criminal justice system unless they've been involved in it. And so they don't understand why they should care. And so I think it's just really, really helpful to have this group of people, both the task force members, but then people who are experts in communication, to really think through how we can talk about these issues to people who don't just care about them, like the folks on this task force who have done 70 meetings now. So thank you guys.
Well, also along the lines of disseminating excellent work, the results of the focus group studies. It seems to me that is really fascinating and useful information for all of the committees on the task force. And I don't want to flood people with task force members with materials they don't want, but I would think that the report from that focus group study would be useful for everyone on the task force to see.
Yeah, we'd be happy to share that. There's a deck that Megan and her team put together that's very helpful and goes through much more detail than I just did. So if anyone would like to see that, we can either just send it to everybody, or you can let me know if you want it. Either is totally fine. I think I agree that it's very interesting and useful.
Well, does anyone object to us sending this to everyone?
Could I add, Justice Earls, that, I think it's fascinating, Laura, about the data, and that's not as persuasive as the personal stories. But everyone on this task force probably knows with each issue, we do know of personal stories and how we can get those forward to you. Anytime we're interviewed by the media on an issue, it's like, well, do you know someone who was 7 years old in a courtroom so we could interview them? But I think you're right, pushing those personal stories is very important, and that probably each of us knows somewhere there is the story behind this issue. Are you the best person to try to get that too?
That would be great. Yeah, sure. That's wonderful. That would be very helpful.
I do want to echo just getting out the one-pagers to the task force. I think folks have various comfort levels with using the share drive. So just making sure that there's access to it in a way that folks will use it, I think will be really important. And for me, it was really helpful to alert a lot of folks about the Raise the Age hearing, and make sure to be able to share the one pager. And I think the more we're able to tie those together, I think all of us have some understanding that there's a need to recognize just the sensitivities around the General Assembly and the TREC and what's coming from the task force versus other ways to really move these recommendations forward. But having those fact sheets and having that information is critical. So I just want to make sure task force members, especially as you go talk to your representative or senator, have those ready with them.
I would also say that it's important to emphasize that these efforts are not inconsistent with public safety. We have Chief here and others, and in our messaging, I think that needs to be heard as well. I think you mentioned economic disparities was more attractive to some certain segment. However you deliver that message, it also needs to be backed up at the same time that this is being done in the context of protecting public safety as well. And I don't know if the Chief wants to jump in on that, but I think it needs to happen at the same time.
I would absolutely echo the importance of tying in public safety. I think that what I've learned over the last couple of years, kind of organizing with the center right, is that the importance of shifting from tough on crime to smart on crime, just talking about how these policies truly do keep us safer. When we use the evidence of what is effective in keeping crime down, it better informs policy. And so I think the public safety has to be a part of the conversation, but most of the, these reforms really are a better way of achieving public safety.
All right. Well, I don't see anyone else wanting to comment here. I sort of want to volunteer this committee. I'm so impressed to hear this report. I know we kind of initially weren't clear what this committee might do, but you've really come forward with some enormously helpful material. And what I kind of want to suggest is I think all of the other committees are used to, if we have a data need, there's a data committee, but now I want all the other committees to also think if you have a communications need. And I'm thinking, for example, the local policy committee. There might be ways in which you're thinking of trying to generate support for a local initiative. And I kind of want to encourage you to think about, can the communications committee help with that? So just to make a little more work for this. Excellent.
Oh, absolutely, Justice Earls. I don't see, oh, no, I do see Mike on the line as the chair of the local policy committee, but that's absolutely been a part of the conversations. And in fact, there's already one collaboration going on right now regarding restorative justice between local policy and the communications, but lots of best practices guides being discussed that I think communications will be particularly helpful with.
Right.
And this is Mike, and my camera, I'm at a computer that doesn't have a camera, but I am here, and I would agree with Jasmine.
Mike, I'm sorry, we can hear that you're talking, but can you turn your volume up?
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
I don't have much to add, just to agree with Jasmine and to say that we will continue to look for ways to work with that communication, because that is really key for what we're trying to do.
Great, thank you so much. Any other comments, observations for this committee? All right, well, that brings us to the data committee.
Hi, everyone. I am excited to give you an update on all the work we've been pursuing. Let me share my screen with you all. Okay. So we have been hard at work at both the recommendations that were referred to us by the other 4 committees and also TREC's recommendation to improve our criminal justice data systems and reporting statewide. First up, we have this recommendation 23, and all of the recommendations referred to us by the executive branch committee number 1. We are planning a joint meeting with committee number 1 to hear from the governor's office fellow Leah Katati on April 30th at 11 a.m. on her work related to this recommendation on data on discipline in schools and school-based referrals. I will follow up with the full task force membership when the details of that meeting are finalized. I've seen a preview of Leah's work and it's excellent. And so I'm very excited for the full group to see that. And I will make sure that folks know how to access that meeting. Next up is a collaboration with the Governor's Office of Strategic Partnerships. We are partnering with them on these 3 recommendations to hopefully find an academic or research organization to perform these 3 studies. Staff, myself, others will keep the data committee and then the broader TREC committee informed as that process moves forward. The last one from the executive branch committee referred to us is this collection of law enforcement recruitment and diversity efforts. We're sort of pursuing a 2-pronged approach on that one. We are reviewing and possibly augmenting the ways in which law enforcement agencies collect demographic data, but we've also reached out to BLET providers at community colleges to learn more about their data collection efforts for who enters BLET training and then who graduates from BLET. Go. Next up, we have those recommendations referred to us by the Judicial Branch Committee. We are currently reviewing data collection efforts around prosecutor offices and how they could possibly be expanded statewide or to new offices. We had an excellent meeting this week, and I want to thank data committee members Emily Coward, Margaret Grushin, and Will Crozier for thinking through next steps. We are going to review information that all 3 of them have and then report out at our next data committee meeting on possible next steps. I'm also very excited to announce something that we talked about at our last data committee meeting, which is the Sentencing and Policy Advisory Commission is undertaking the recommended study on racial disparities in sentencing laws with an eye toward potential changes. Big thank you to Michelle Hall and her team from the Sentencing Commission, who have been great partners with us in this work, and we're excited to see this study moving forward. We also recommended a commission on the state jury system, and researchers at UNC are beginning actually a study in partnership with the task force related to this recommendation 94 that could do some of this same work as the commission. Big thank you to the data committee members, Emily Coward and Frank Baumgartner, for their leadership in this effort. As that study moves forward, they will keep the data committee informed and then of course report out to the full task force. Lastly, we have this one recommendation referred to us by the local policy group. We heard a little bit about this at the last data committee meeting, but we are compiling a list of possible speakers to come and speak to the data committee about how the use of data in this particular context around police presence could possibly exacerbate racial disparities in criminal justice. And we want to make sure that we are finding ways to proactively address that concern. So us on staff are coming up with a list of folks that could come to speak to that committee to ensure that we aren't pursuing policies that actually are, out of line with the values that TREC put forth with this recommendation. On our broader efforts to improve data collection and reporting, we are encouraging all TREC members, not just data committee members, to contribute to our collection of research questions. We think that this will help inform the GDAC study on criminal justice data statewide. So if any task force members have research questions that you've thought about and you feel like you can't get answers to in our current environment, I think it would be really helpful to send those to me, please, so I can compile that list. Carol Burrows has been incredibly helpful to our group and has encouraged us to sort of submit questions or data points that don't feel like an option right now so that we can improve that system in the future. We are pursuing a similar strategy around court data, and I want to thank Michelle Hall, Ben Feinholt, Margaret Gressett, and Frank Baumgartner and Emily Coward for helping me with this effort. We've had a couple of meetings and email exchanges, and I think that we're on a good path forward for thinking through data points and questions to pose as we hopefully improve the system moving forward. That is my update. I also talk fast. Happy to answer any questions folks have about our work.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Ellen. This is Secretary Hooks from the Department of Public Safety. Thank you for that excellent brief out. It sounds like you've got some great partners engaged. I think the Sentencing Commission has been extraordinary in their data collection and has a lot to offer to the table. I do want to encourage you all too to have full engagement with the Governor's Crime Commission, the staff that's in the statistical analysis section. We have rebuilt that staff within the last few years. Statisticians, experts in the field that give a non-biased look and can analyze and fully participate with the data. And of course, our Attorney General has a seat that is delegated to David Elliott that sits on that commission, and that commission has a statutory requirement to be a chief advisory body to both to me and to the governor, and that staff works for me. So you have full access to them as well. And so I just want to make sure that you have any resource that you need moving forward. So I want to make that commitment to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I've seen some very excellent reports they've put out recently on the traffic stop data. So yes, I will be sure to engage with them. So thank you.
Well, I have a question to follow up on your request that we contribute research questions. Yes. And I'm probably the only one who doesn't know this, but what is the GDAC? And what kind of research questions would be relevant? You said that, so, yeah.
I actually have a full list that I think is in the appendix of our report. And I pulled it out recently and turned it into a Word document. So I can send that around to the full group so you understand the research questions we already included in our report. It's sort of varied at page like 150. So I'll send that back around for people to contribute to. It's the North Carolina Government Data Analytics Center. So they help with all of our systems in terms of data collection and reporting. And Carol Burrows, who sort of sits over some of the criminal justice work with that group, has been on the data committee from the beginning and works closely with Natalia too. But yeah, I will send that list around so that you know what we've already collected and can contribute more to.
Thank you.
Justice Oaks, were you also asking about the Office for Strategic Partnerships research question project, or is your question answered?
Well, so I think and I don't want to take everyone else's time, but I do think that it would be useful for all of us to think about what data questions are most important and that we want to see research on, because throughout this work we've seen how either the lack of data makes it hard to address these issues, or just how central data is to monitoring our progress in and evaluating the reforms that we are now so successfully getting on the road to being implemented. But yes, if you could also, I say the GDAC study that is describe that for people, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, so that was a study that is legislatively required. It was included in prior legislation to study our criminal justice data collection systems and what we collect and what we report out. That's apart from TREC's effort, but they have encouraged us to participate in that effort with them. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to think through, again, those two sort of tracks, things we've already said we want to study, and then things that would help us evaluate the recommendations and their implementation and their effect. So that is a package of sort of questions and data points that GDAC has offered to work with us to include in their study.
So just a little more context on the study. That was actually legislation that that I had worked on with several of my colleagues. It started as legislation that was aimed to require better data from jail systems. I think that we found out there were 40 different software systems that the different jails use, and some still maintain records on paper. And so, you know, lawyers are losing clients. They're in different county jails. They don't know where they are. People are getting lost in the mix. And so we'd approached GDAC with the legislation that would have required a jails, and Carol Burrows and John Corrella's head just about exploded. They were like, there's no way we can do this. We are so far away from being able to do this. So it was sort of readjusted to a study of what the system data collection looks like, so that we can then inform what better collection of the jail data would look like. And John Corellis was, when TREC was created, he called me and said he was really committed to working with TREC to use that study to really provide meaningful information to inform this work.
Thank you. That's very helpful to me. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, we do have people signed up to speak. At the end of each of our meetings, we have a public hearing segment to give people 2 minutes to address the commission. So, and we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I do believe I'm right that we have waiting at least some of the folks who signed up to speak to us today. But before we get to that stage, I do want to open up to the task force. There's some of you here who haven't had a chance to say anything yet. Are there any issues you want to bring for the good of the whole? Any comments, any observations, anything that anyone else wants to contribute at this point?
Yes, this is Kerwin Pittman. I'm sorry, I just have a quick question for Senator Mohammed. I'm looking for that bill and I cannot find it. If somebody could drop the number or the name of the bill again, I think it was the omnibus bill, so I can look it up, please. Thank you.
Hey, Kerwin, sure, I can message it to you. No worries.
But I had it that was Senate Bill 656. I hope I'm right about that.
I think that's correct. Correct, Justice Earls. I'd have to take a look at it. I know the bills by their titles, but there's so many bill numbers, it's difficult to keep track of them. So I'll get it to you, Kerwin, in just a moment.
Actually, well, I guess the reason I'm asking is because I have the same interest. If you could, can you put in the chat a link to it? Is that fair?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
That'd be awesome. Thanks. Anything else? Okay, so I'm going to ask for staff help here to get us started with our public comment. And it looks like we can, and we're going to try again to have a timer on the screen so that when we admit the person who's going to address us, they'll be able to see their time. It looks like the first person is going to be Daniel Bose.
Daniel, I'm going to promote you now to panelist.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Bose. I serve as the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the ACLU of North Carolina. Let me start by thanking the individual members of the committee and staff for the significant work and energy you have contributed to TREC over the last year. Unfortunately, I'm speaking today to raise a flag of caution and to criticize TREC for starting to follow the ineffectual path of similar task force efforts. Based on my prior experience helping staff and support Governor Cooper's Street Safe Task Force in 2010 and his State Reentry Council collaborative over the last few years, I'm worried that TREC is not adequately responding to the urgency and needs of the moment, and worse yet, is promoting a mostly false sense of progress towards implementing its recommendations that have already been drastically narrowed based on feasibility. Watching TREC's last meeting in March and again today, I'm gravely concerned that symbolic and largely ineffectual efforts are being presented as viable paths to achieving real reform, especially in regards to the legislative recommendations. This effort to disguise inaction as progress is not only disheartening, it is counterproductive and harmful, especially to people of color. Whether it is intentional or not, disguising inaction as progress can be far more harmful than doing nothing at all, because a concerted advocacy takes up so much space and gives the illusion of real progress that other stakeholders and advocates rely on and defer to. This is a failure of leadership. I am speaking out today to call on Governor Roy Cooper to lend the full resources and absolute commitment of his administration and the state agencies he controls to implementing TREC recommendations and more systemic reforms. As a lobbyist advocating on criminal justice reform for the last 9 years, it is clear to me that TREC is not receiving the support and prioritization that Governor Cooper promised and the ACLU of North Carolina and impacted people expect. This veiled deprioritization is unfair to the members of TREC and represents a type of violent inaction that will maintain and potentially harden the racial inequities that must be addressed in our criminal legal system. Thank you for the opportunity to make these comments.
Thank you so much. I want to invite you to submit your comments in written form as well, if you have them written for us. Thank you. Then the next is William Grizak.
William, I will now promote you to panelist.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, and I am grateful that each of you has dedicated some of your time to this committee and this organization. However, like Mr. Bose, my comments are largely critical of the system writ large. So I was released from prison almost 3 months ago and have been working as the executive director for an organization called Faceless No More ever since, dedicating the rest of my life to trying to fix the ills of the system. I am wholly disappointed having the lived experience inside the North Carolina Department of Public Safety adult corrections system with what is available to the men and women in the system. I have been participating in this both from an inside and outside perspective, read the governor's report from 2018 and followed the progress since then. And almost none of those recommendations have been put in place with any efficacy whatsoever. The on-the-ground support that the case management teams inside the system and then the reentry councils outside the system receive does not reach the men and women that need the help the most. Largely, it is theoretical in its application and lacks tactical acuity in achieving the results that we all desire. I was in the system for almost 5 years and saw too many men come in, go out, and then return for issues that would have been avoided if the support and stigma was removed from the team. So I will leave it at that. And thank you very much for your time and support. And I encourage these meetings to continue. And thank you again for listening.
Well, thank you for your comments and sharing your experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Then we have, I think our next person is Ms. Phoenix.
That's correct. 1 second.
Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes.
This is my first ever Zoom call. This is not my thing, so bear with me. I also did not realize that there was a time limit set. Like I said, I had no idea. So I am going to do a massacre of the notes that I wrote because I've touched on absolutely a lot of, I'm advocating specifically for one particular inmate because he encompasses every injustice that can be done. So, I mean, from having a bum lawyer to, you know, a prosecutor with whatever, you know, ambition, everything that can and will go wrong in the justice system, which you people out of everybody actually knows what I'm talking about, where I don't have to convince anybody. When I first came on, they were talking about the personal stories, how that's the way to lead. This is one, and I've written it out, and I'd be more than happy to send it to you, and or record it and send you a link. It's the main of this is an M was filed dealing with old law inmates, okay, which is a big concern of mine, because they have done the most time for the same amount of crimes that the structured sentencing inmates are getting released on in a fraction of that amount of time. With Governor Cooper committing to release several thousand inmates within a 6-month period of time, I truly hope that he considers old law inmates seriously, because they have done most of their time. An issue, oh God, I got 46 seconds. An issue that needs to be looked at is when the DOC transferred over to the OPUS system, the old law inmates lost their standing. This inmate had a release date of 2017. And when the OPUS system took over, it changed to 999. After a couple of lawsuits, now it just says life. But if you can't whittle down your time, there is no end date for you ever, even though that was only a projected release date, but you were entitled to good time, gain time, and meritorious time. So they are serving way more. And this inmate in particular has done 48 years with one minor infraction. 48 years. If he was sentenced today, he wouldn't do more than 18. So that to me is kind of unjust. So anybody that can get somebody to look at his case, I would appreciate it. Actually, I know I'm over. I really apologize. AG Stein just got a copy of a writ of cert in his office last week referring to this case. So if you haven't looked at it yet, you may want to look at it. It's very exact, and it has merit. And there's a judge involved. There's a lot involved. A lot of people have done not so good things. And like I said, if you read this, you probably still wouldn't believe it, even knowing all the stuff that you already know.
Well, thank you for braving Zoom to share that with us. And I do invite you to send us whatever you have in writing as well.
Do that email or snail mail, or how do you want it?
Through email, I think if you can would be easiest.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
And then I believe we also have Joe Johnson to address us.
Yep.
Can you hear me at this point?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Joe Johnson. Actually, my whole intent is to ask a question. I listened to a lot of the meetings that the task force held, and I saw that there were over 100 recommendations made. And I was interested in, obviously, the tracking mechanism for keeping up with them, but how can a citizen go about pushing or advocating for these recommendations to be adopted by the Senate and the representative? Is there a way for me to know which bill, what they're looking at, and how to move these things forward? Because I think some of the recommendations I'm fully in favor of, most of them, and I have no way of advocating on behalf of them.
So you raise a good question, and I think what I can say is the best thing is that we now know that you are interested in these recommendations, and that the legislative committee and the communications committee that are working on these can potentially get you information. It's hard for me to say we don't have a public facing website. There will be some news reports about some of the recommendations. So to some degree, this is just following what's in the news. But I think it's useful. I mean, I appreciate you coming and letting us know you're interested in supporting the recommendations. That's helpful for us to know. I don't know if do any of the staff have other suggestions or responses?
I'm just concerned if you are moving a particular bill forward, there ought to be some kind of lobbying effort. If I wanted to get 150 people to support a specific recommendation, there ought to be some mechanism for me to know which bill is being, and who's the lead, representative or senator to talk to. And right now it just goes in and from what my understanding is, it just sits, I don't know who's doing what, and I don't know who's for, who's against. And all I'm saying is if there's somebody against, I should be able to make a case or call them or do something to advocate why that bill should be supported or that particular recommendation should be supported. And is there any, if it's nothing set up like that, is that possible to have something like that set up?
Well, and thank you. I mean, you make a very good point. And typically we just listen, but I don't know if any of our legislators who are on the call want to try to respond.
I'll take a stab at it.
Thank you.
Johnson, thank you so much. We wish we had a lot more like you. We file bills almost every day. There could be 50, 60, 70 bills filed, and it'll end as of next week. And if we could get your email, happy to send out, like I'm trying to track what bills I've filed. Senator Mohammed has filed an omnibus bill that could get a lot of, we hope, support from citizens. And the best thing to do is to contact your own legislator, the representative, senator in your district, and then contact other people you know who live possibly in different districts to contact their representatives. But we'll be happy to try and get you the list of bills that have been filed and are going forward. And that personal contact, email, call to your local representative, senator has the biggest impact. It's hard because every bill then is assigned to a committee, and we never know where it's going, and it can go from one committee to another before it goes to a full vote on the Senate or House floor. So it's confusing to us too, but we'll do our best to try and maybe on the TREC website, we can show the major bills and where they're going to go and when they're going to be coming up. But thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think that I want to check in with staff. Is there anyone else who was signed up who's available to speak to us?
No, sorry, I'm in front of the timer. No, we're all good.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank everyone who addressed us today during the public comment session. It's very, very helpful, and we really appreciate it. That really brings us to the end of the agenda for this meeting, unless anyone has anything else. Maybe this would be a good time for the staff to remind us when our next full task force meeting is scheduled to be, which I didn't warn them I was going to ask them to do. So I'll just bluster for a minute or two. But I do think that it is so important that we are all together and hear from the different groups. And certainly next meeting, we will hear from some of the other committees about the work that's proceeding. Can anyone tell us when our next meeting is?
Yes, our next meeting is July 2nd.
All right. So you thought you were going to get away for the July 4th holiday, but you'll be with us at least on July 2nd. And if no one else has anything,
I just have one possible suggestion or comment. Is it possible to have the legislative committee kind of coordinate with the communications team to help citizens, or create a one-pager to help citizens track those bills that are filed on behalf of the recommendations from the task force, so citizens can kind of have know what to get behind and kind of push if possible? I think that it may help, just citizens track these different bills and say, okay, these recommendations came from the task force. So maybe we could have one of the cross-cutting committees or just the legislative team kind of get with the communications team and create some type of one page to kind of help the citizens.
Kerwin, I like that idea, and I was thinking about it as you spoke. I think it's worth a conversation with you. So I'm going to reach out to you and maybe connect with Bradford just as to sort of and Tara, just the best way to do that, to get the word out about the various bills. I mean, things are moving so fast, But I think having a place where we can point people to just what are the main things they should look at, and then how to get the one pagers is exactly what we need to be doing.
I definitely, and it will kind of bring some of the distrust and maybe kind of wipe away at the illusion that we have become stagnated. So communication is really key for community members to see the progress that the task force is doing and the work we're doing.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Well, thank you all for your time and for your commitment. I look forward to seeing you all in committee meetings, and we'll adjourn for today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.